is your time. This is your party, and you're here to visit with your traveling friends and neighbors. That's what we have this for. It's for your enjoyment. And another reason we have it is to get you all in one wad and tell you how much we love and appreciate you. And thank you for going with us like you do and supporting us. So this is what we try to do back for you. To give you guys this opportunity to come and visit and see one another. We realize it's cold outside, and old man winter has arrived, but at least it's not snowing, and we don't have ice on the power lines and on the roads. And we are lucky to, I guess, to even meet you this evening. Thanks for coming out and making the effort. We want to welcome all of you and ask you to make yourself at home and enjoy yourself. And we'll be eating at around 4:30 this afternoon. And, we got some things we're going to do. We got a lot of people that ain't here yet that we know's coming. So y'all just visit and have a good time. Got plenty of coffee on both sides. If you like coffee. And just make yourself at home and enjoy yourself. We'll get going here in a little while. Okay? Glad you come. Glad you're here. Mama, you want to say anything to this bunch of young?
Did y'all notice how I stood here and kept my mouth shut?
Been working on that.
I should say something like, you know me, I'm Neil's slave. Those of you that travel with us know where I got that. We are glad to have each and every one of you, and I just ditto what Neil said. It is your party. We hope you have a good time. We have a lot of people that are sick right now that travel with us that called and said they were sick. But we'll remember them and tell them later on in the year what a good time we had. Again, just mingle with each other and give us a little bit of time for a few more folks to come in, and then we'll have our dinner and start our entertainment, do whatever we're going to do for the evening. Okay? Get you back home before it gets really, really cold later. Thank you.
Yeah, I could be easier to transport. There you are, Sam. Welcome, I can't stand it. Huh? That's me. There you are, honey. It changes when it's in black and white, though. Yeah. There you are, sugar. You're welcome. All right, buddy. You thought you was getting out of it, but you ain't. See, I looked at him. I figured he'd been involved in a holdup. I gotta write you up, buddy. Hey, folks, this is Checkpoint Chicky. I'm on location down here in Florence, Alabama. Yeah, I run into this fella here. He's been involved in a holdup, I believe. Hi, girls. Hey, y'all, get over here. I'm writing you up. Doris. I'll do it. Come on through there, honey.
Thank you.
Sleep your love like burning in your eyes so true. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you.
Hey, wait a minute. This is perfect. Come on, Sally. Come on. This woman's a pickpocket. You damn darn right. I'll swamp you, honey.
You want this?
Look, she's got my dad burn calendar.
Where'd I get it?
I don't know. Folks, I want you to know that Sally's a dad burn pickpocket.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. Where are we going afterwards?
Thank you. He didn't flash. He didn't have a flash on.
I told you that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
They wanted to know, is David, a.k.a. Barney, married? Well, when you got this much animal magnetism, what do you think? Y'all can't answer that, can you? Yeah, me and Pal Malou got married back in '89, I believe, and returned to Mayberry. Prepare a speech or nothing, but here comes that girl who's been to the prom. Folks, I'm not normally accustomed to speaking out in front of a crowd of people. It makes me a little bit nervous. I had an uncle one time. He was standing out on this stage out in front of a big crowd of people, and he slipped and he fell down through a hole in the middle of that stage. And we talked about it. We figured he'd have broken both of his legs if it hadn't been for that rope around his neck. See, buddy, rope around his neck. That's a punchline right there. That same uncle, I got a letter from him up there in Mayberry the other day. That same uncle I was telling you about, he worked up there at the paint factory in Mayberry, and he was climbing up a ladder there the other week, and he climbed up that ladder, and he got to the top rung, and he fell head first off of it down into a vat full of varnish. Yeah, and he couldn't swim, and he drowned in that varnish. And that letter said that it was a terrible death, but it was a beautiful finish. Did you get that in all right, buddy? Now, folks, normally when I speak out in a crowd like this, somebody will usually ask me how I got into the lawman game. I appreciate that, honey. I appreciate that. Well, it kind of goes like this, see. Me and Thelma Lou, we was sitting over at the Snappy Lunch eating supper, and she says to me, she says, Barney, why don't you go over and talk to Andy and see if he'll let you be his deputy? I says, all right. So I went over there and I says, Ange, how's about me being your deputy? He says, Barney, that'd be fine. He says, but first, you've got to pass a test. I says, Andy, what kind of a test is it? He says, it's simple. It's only got one question. I says, what's that? He says, the question is, who shot Abraham Lincoln? I says, Andy, could I have overnight to think about it? He says, yeah, go on home and think about it. So that next night, me and Thelma Lou, we was sitting back over there at the Snappy Lunch eating supper, and she says to me, she says, Barney, did you get that job as a deputy? I says, yeah, I think so. Andy's already got me working on a case. Hey, folks, let me ask y'all something. How many of you all in here remember the Darling family? You remember the Darlings? Briscoe and the boys and Charlene? You remember them, don't you? Well, you may or may not know this, but people come up there to North Carolina. They like to come up where them mountains are, and they like to do what they call hang gliding. Y'all know what hang gliding is, don't you? Them big multicolored things them fellers hang on it and they go sailing like a kite. Well, Briscoe Darling here back in the fall, his home place is right there at the foot of Mount Pilot. Well, he was out there breaking up the ground. He was a plowing or something. He wanted to plant some corn. See, they like to grow a little bit of corn, them Darling boys do. Then they liquefy it, I think. But anyway, Briscoe was out there at that plow, and he was a plowing the ground up. And one of them multicolored hang gliders come off of the side of Mount Pilot and come sailing over his property. Well, Briscoe looked up there and he seen that thing. Paul, what's going on around here? Old Briscoe looked back up there and he says to her, he says, Charlene, I don't know what that thing was, but I made it let that feller go. Hey, buddy, stand up there a second. Stand up there. Can y'all see him all right? I needed me a model here. Do any, turn around there. He's not very cooperative, I'll tell you that. Do any of y'all remember Mr. Schwump down there in Mayberry? Mr. Schwump had to wear one of them, a toupee. That's it, honey. Yeah, thanks. Well, he lost his toupee, and he had to order one out of a catalog. Well, it come in about 2 weeks, you know. It's all wrapped up in this box with brown paper all around it. And well, Mr. Schwump, he was real excited about that, and he took the brown paper off of the box, and the top of it said, 100% cat hair toupee. Well, he took the lid off of that box, and he took that toupee out of there, and he shook it out right good, and he laid it right up on his head. It looked so pretty. You kind of like that, don't you, buddy? And it looked so pretty just laying up there, but it had one little problem with it. Every time somebody rubbed his head, he'd arch his back up. Thanks, buddy. That's enough. Sit down. I just felt like I needed to introduce you to Mr. Schwump. I appreciate that, buddy. He was a good model. But Mr. Schwump, up until last week, it's kind of a sad story, and I almost hate to tell it, but I'm going to tell it anyways. Mr. Schwump, up until last week, was the oldest living resident of Mayberry, North Carolina. He was 114 years old. Well, bless his heart, in his sleep last week, he passed away. Well, they fixed him up now, and they laid him out in this box, and they got 6 of them boys up there in Mayberry that was willing to carry him way up the hill there at the end of Main Street to the cemetery. Well, they got that box with Mr. Schwump in it up on their shoulders, and up that steep hill they went. Oh, buddy, I didn't mention it had rained real hard the night before that, and that red dirt up there in the cemetery had got wet, and it had turned to mud. Well, now the boy on the front of that box with Mr. Schwump in it, his right foot hit that wet mud, and down he went. And when he fell, them other 5 boys had lost their balance, and they dropped what they had. Now, when that box with Mr. Schwump in it hit that steep hill, I mean, it just took off like a shot. When it hit Main Street, buddy, it was doing 35 miles an hour. I'm telling you, it went all the way down the middle of Main Street, and it hit the curb right there in front of the drugstore. It jumped the curb, and it hit the double doors there at the drugstore, and it went right on in. It went all the way back through the middle of the drugstore, and when it got to that counter in the back there, Miss Ellie, that lady druggist, do you remember her? She come running out of the back room. Well, at about the same time, the lid of that box flew open, and Mr. Schwump sat straight up in that box, and he looked at Miss Ellie, and he says to her, he says, you got anything to stop this coughing? That took a while, didn't it? Hey, folks, I can't tell you all what a great pleasure it is for me to be here today. I have been doing this character, the Mayberry Deputy, since 1988. But since 1994, I've been doing it full time. I do the character about 300 days a year, all over the country for different gatherings like this. I do a great many churches. I do a great many chambers of commerce, police and sheriff functions, fireman functions. And when I met these folks with Nancy's Tours 2 years ago, what a great friendship we developed immediately. And they invited me last year, and I couldn't come.
And this year they invited me again, and I am so pleased to be here with you all today. I think that the Andy Griffith Show is possibly the greatest piece of creative work ever made for television. I really, really do. Not because it's created a living for me, but because I think Andy Griffith and Don Knotts and all of the actors that were on that show genuinely enjoyed what they were doing, genuinely believed in what they were doing as far as sending any kind of a message out. They did not ever want to send anything negative out, and they didn't. 240-some shows. They never left a negative impact on anybody. And what a great, great mission in life that can be. And I think Andy Griffith certainly, as the leader of that group, should be well thought of, and I believe he is well thought of in this country. You know, his hometown, Mount Airy, North Carolina, we hold an event every year called Mayberry Days. And, of course, Andy grew up in Mount Airy, and they've modeled so many things after things that Andy had mentioned on the show. There's a snappy lunch there, and there's a Floyd's Barber Shop, and a couple of places you can see Wally's Service Station signs up, and the gift stores, and the memorabilia, and the tourist office there is just really wonderful and reminds you of all of the good memories that you have of the show. And so we do that in September. Then they have another event in October called the Autumn Leaves Festival. And these are folks who just come to the mountains to see the leaves turn. And of course it's the second week of October, and the mountains are just ablaze there in North Carolina in mid-October. It draws about 40 to 50,000 people. And in that small town, I used to work that event. In that small town, 30, 40, 50,000 people are just shoulder to shoulder. The couple of times I've met with and been on the coach with the Nancy's Tour folks was during an event called the Storytellers Festival in May, I believe. And we had the best time because I prefer improvisational type performing. And the folks that you bring up there are just so ready and willing to have a good time that it was a good time for me too. So I ended up spending the whole day practically on the coach with the folks, and then coming to the Fine Arts or the Arts Center that night and seeing a show with them and just visiting with them. And you know, I remember different folks like George Jones over here. George, stand up and wave at him. Look at that. There's George. Yeah. The possum is here. And let's see, Otis Campbell is here. Where's Otis? Otis, stand up and wave at everybody. There's the real Otis Campbell. Yeah. Bless his heart. But that's the kind of thing that I realized when I first met these folks, is that these aren't just people traveling, these are friends. And it's really neat to walk in here today and remember faces and share some comments about our time that we spent together up in Mount Airy. Well, in November, there's a group of you coming back, and I'm going to be with you for the whole day. And I had some folks asking me, well, is it Mayberry? Andy described it on television one time. He said, you know, Mount Airy is a real city that has real problems like a real city would. And he said, in Mayberry, we created a problem each week and solved it in a half hour. But in Mount Airy, they are retaining a lot of the things that we thought of and we think of when we see the show. And it is really kind of a Shangri-La kind of city when you come in there. It's difficult for me to say because I go there and I'm immediately immersed into work because people want me to be Barney Fife. I'm not Barney Fife, but they want me to be Barney Fife so desperately. And so I end up working constantly when I'm in Mount Airy, almost to the point where I miss some of the charm. But there is a great amount of charm in Mount Airy, North Carolina. The people are genuine. They're very, very friendly and receptive to you. And the Visitor Center, that's what I was trying to think of, not Tourist Center, Visitor Center. They actually have one of Matlock's suits hanging in there that Andy gave them to show. And they have videotapes and story of Andy's Andy's life and growing up in Mount Airy. And it's just a very, very pleasant time. One thing people really don't think about is Mount Airy has the largest open-faced granite quarry in the world. They ship granite all over the world, and they've been doing it for 100 years, and they've only gone down like 14 feet, and it's deep, very, very deep, and so they'll be in business as far as granite till forever. But I look forward to this date in November. I hope many of you will decide to come to Mount Airy because I'll sure enjoy spending the day with you. You never know what I'm going to get involved in. I mean, in Mount Airy, it all comes to life, and the character is constant in Mount Airy. So it'll be a fun day. I usually deputize everybody that comes. Yeah, because we need a lot of deputies in Mayberry. It's a jungle is what it is. Before I sit down, I want to tell you, my name's David Browning. I live up in Bristol, Virginia. And as I said, I do about 300 days a year. I close every program that I do with something that, and this is true, a fellow who was about 90 years old quoted 3 years ago, I think it was, in Erwin, Tennessee. Anybody ever heard of Erwin, Tennessee, Unicoi County? Great farming community. I had spoken in front of a group of about 350 farmers. And when I sat down, the moderator was closing the program, and Earl, I think was his name, stood up, 90 years old, shook his cane in the air and said, "You can't close this meeting until I've spoken." So the moderator said, "Certainly, Earl, you can have the floor." So he quoted what I'd like to share with you. He learned it during the Second World War. And when he quoted it, I knew that I had to know it too, because it reflects exactly how I feel about being here today. It reflects how I feel about the Andy Griffith Show and what it means to us as human beings. Each of us, if we could be like Andy, lifting other people up, what a great mission in life that would be. This is simply called Pathways, and I would like to share it with you. Now, when the evening shades is fallen at the close of the day, and I'm just sitting around passing the time away, there's a thought that comes to cheer me if I'm feeling kind of blue. Sort of little prayer of gratitude for crossing paths with you. Now, I never had the habit of spilling a lot of bluff or indulging in mushiness and sentimental stuff, but if I like folks, I tell them. Up and tell them now instead of writing funny epitaphs about them when they're dead. So I'm sending you this message just because I want to say that I'm glad the Lord arranged it so that you could pass my way. Just to hear your voice and see you made my sky a shade more blue. I'm just a bit more blessed since crossing paths with you. Thanks so much for having me here today. Thank you very much. Oh, that was good. That was good.
Thank you. Thank you, David. How many of you been to Mount Airy with us? How many have been to Mount Airy? Okay, we did it as add-on trip year before last, and then last year we did in our catalog. We had a bushel of fun. But we decided to do it not during the Storytelling Festival this time so that we could have more time with David when we were there, rather than have to share it with everybody during the Storytelling Festival. When those folks were on stage putting on their red pajamas, I don't think I told you, but the guys that were up here, Buck and Ellis or Niels, cousins. And I have an uncle. Uncle Johnny's here, and my mom's here. Where you guys at? Right over there. Right over there, got my mother. And there's somebody else. We had a lady that had probably the worst experience anybody's ever had on one of our tours this year. We had kind of a little running joke that every time they got ready to go on tour, a day or two before, something would happen to her, and it's been happening for quite a while. They got on the bus this time. We were on our way to California, and her husband said, well, we made it this time without anything happening. He said she'd broke a tooth, she'd hurt her back, I don't know, different things had happened to her. But he said, this time we finally made it. Well, the second day out, she fell and broke her leg. So, Joyce, we're glad that you're here. Joyce and Buster Lovell, they had to fly home on their California trip, so let's give them a big hand. We're glad that you're able to be with us tonight, and all went well there. I want to give you a few minutes to mingle, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask Dorothy to come up and lead us in a patriotic song as we end. And then give away our last gift certificate. It's a $200 gift certificate. We didn't give away trips this year. We gave away gift certificates. And the reason is that this past year we gave away a trip at our reunion, and that trip ended up being canceled. And that didn't cause a problem, but it caused us to have to deal with that. And we decided that if we gave gift certificates, then you could choose where you'd like to go yourself, and we wouldn't be telling you had to go to a certain place. Then you could use it anytime you wanted to. There are two things I wanted to say about the catalog, and that is that on the Mount Airy, it does say that it's 3 nights, but of course the dates, and I'll tell you that it's 2 nights. That was just an error. It is a 3-day, 2-night trip. And on the Carl Hurley show that's in Nashville, it doesn't say where Carl Hurley's show is, but it is in Nashville. It's a day trip to Nashville, Tennessee. Carl Hurley is a humorist. He's a professor. How many of you know who Carl Hurley is? Most of you do. He is a retired professor from Eastern Kentucky State University. He's just good, clean humor, and he's a wonderful entertainer. So he's one of our day trips also. All right, just mingle a little bit. We'll ask Dorothy to come up. We'll finish with our patriotic song and then give the gift certificate away.
I want to say thanks to you one more time, and hope you had a very, very happy holiday season, and that you have a great 1999. Thanks for coming, and I'm going to let Dorothy lead our song, and I'm going to get over to the door, okay?
So since this is the beginning of 1999, let's go ahead and do that as we sing America, and Dorothy's going to lead that. Thank you again for coming out tonight. I hope you have a safe trip home. I know it went a little bit faster tonight, but it is supposed to be really cold, and we want to try to get you home as quick as we could. And we hope to see you in 99. I want to be over the door and say goodbye to you. Again, thank you for coming, and I'm looking forward to seeing you real, real soon. And before we leave, I think we ought to give David Browning another big hand for coming and being with us tonight. And the person that wins this $200 gift certificate, where's David? David, you going to give it to him? He's busy. You want to pass out this certificate? All right, be sure to go by whoever wins this and let someone over at the desk know that who you are so we can get that down. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my own sweet home. God bless America, my own sweet home. God bless each of you.